talk about filming in the outdoor scenes with like the containers and like the mob scene, kind of the flash forward, and then that, like, what were the logistics that kind of went into filming that?
Yeah, and there's more of that as the show goes on, but it's a logistical challenge because you need a lot of people, a lot of space, a lot of chaos. Thankfully, there are some areas in Atlanta that provided big, wide open spaces near these rail yards, so it gave us some scope. But in many of those instances, we actually did line up containers 3 high over a long span. So it's quite impressive to see it, to be down there and look at it. And I think some of that will really come through.
And it was a thrill just knowing, that this was going to last for ultimately, I think, 19 days in the first season. And to really try and track, well, what would happen if that whole area was quarantined? What would happen to garbage pickup? Would there be any garbage pickup? Like, what would people be wearing? And really trying to track the devolution of a neighborhood over that time period was also just a really fun exercise. Not something you get to do every day because usually you're telling it as it is. So that was cool.
I really like that you guys really delve into, police brutality.
Yeah.
You talk about immigration. Can you talk about how important that was in this story for you?
It's very important. I mean, I think what's great about the show is very topical. It deals with xenophobia, viruses, police brutality, race relations in America. You tick a lot of boxes that are important. And I think that the show says some really interesting, important things about all those things. And one thing that's really cool is it also examines what preconceptions people bring into certain situations. And this is obviously a very intense situation. And you sort of see, okay, what are people's first reactions? What are their first snap judgments? And then how are the levels of layers of the onion, pull back? Some people really step up, and then there are others who unfortunately disappoint, and they don't ever transcend. Not everybody in this show is a hero, and not everybody in life in this. If this happened here, you'd see some amazing things out of people and some cowardly actions from maybe people that you would expect and hope would step up. So that's always, as storytellers, kind of interesting, like how do people react under pressure?
And it's also, I think, in a good way, it's somewhat stealth in the sense it's this harrowing virus, right? Everybody's dealing with it. You don't know where it is, where it's going to come from, and yet underneath you get to talk about all those subjects. So you kind of get to have your cake and eat it too, in a sense. Those issues are there regardless, given Atlanta, given the virus, and then so you get to, it's a compelling story of people getting this disease, but then underneath are all these great issues as well.
So I know the show is an adaptation of a European show, and we've seen lots of disaster movies. But where did you get ideas for what you're doing in the show itself?
Well, we did a lot of research. We had a person at CDC who was a consultant. We read a lot of books about Ebola, because that's probably the closest approximation as to what this virus is. Also, the bird flu, what happened in Hong Kong. So really, there is a lot of research. There is, unfortunately, it's happened a lot around the world. It hasn't happened in this country, knock on wood. But to try and think about how it would happen in this country was really fun to actually take that research and extrapolate it into America.
And we would model it out, sort of saying, in this perimeter of space, with this many people, with this infection rate, here's how many people would be on day 4, for example, infected. Here's how many people would be dead. Here's how many, so we did those sort of computer models, like you see, just so we as writers understood what the characters would be experiencing. As they walk the streets, how many dead bodies would they see? So it's fun on one level, and it's also kind of scary to live in that place because you just wouldn't want it to happen.
The more research you do, the more scared you become.
Yeah,
it's real.
Yeah, you talk to infectious disease doctors, and they would not only validate what we were coming up with, but in some ways sort of surpass us in their level of fear and caution and curiosity about what could this happen in America. I mean, I think for them, in the same way that people, modern terrorism and say, well, it's sort of inevitable. They're sort of like, it's very probable that some bad infectious disease, just with the way people travel around the world now, will come here, and hopefully we're prepared, but we're not as prepared as we should be. So that's what the show gets into a little bit.
Is there a character that you predict either the audience is going to absolutely love and gravitate to, or love to hate and still gravitate to?
Both. I mean, there's plenty of both. Yeah.
I mean, but like for you, like who do you predict?
I mean,
they're going to be? Okay.
Well, there's obviously Chris Wood had a large fan base going into this. I think his fan base is going to be even bigger as a result. Kristen, who plays Katie, is just mind-blowing. I'm not sure she'd done anything before this, but she came in and blew everybody away. But I think all our actors were very proud of it, and they did excellent work. So it'd be like picking which child is going to be the most popular one. I'd rather not, stake a bet on that.
Really quick, CW is selling this as an event series. My understanding is that it's not intended to be a closed-ended event series. Is that correct? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Accurate. Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of like a novel where you read it and it has a natural endpoint, and people that read that novel will feel satisfied. Having said that, there's so many more stories that we could tell. So I think in the same way, like for example, Under the Dome was framed up as an event series, and then they were able to do more. So I think given the opportunity to tell more stories, we absolutely could. But it is a very compelling, close-ended story in its own right.